We inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to be with you today on the program. AFR.net is our website. You can go there to listen live to the program and all of our programming 24 hours a day. You can also catch and listen to the podcast there on our website, AFR.net. And then if you want to subscribe to the podcast in your podcast library, you can do that as well. Just type in the name of the program At the Core, click the subscribe button, and the program will be queued up in your library each and every day. Let's turn our attention to the scripture. We're wrapping up the book of, wrapping up Proverbs 28 this week. Looking at verse 1, the wicked flee when no one is pursuing, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. The wicked flee when no one is pursuing, but the righteous are bold as a lion. When I read this passage, I think about the shame and embarrassment that comes with wickedness, that comes with sin, that comes with shame. And whether the unbeliever and the sinner realizes it or not, there is shame that comes with our sin. That's what Proverbs 28 verse 1 is alluding to. And there's also boldness that comes with our righteousness. That's what the latter part of the passage is referring to. That's Proverbs chapter 28 verse 1. Well, I want to remind you of our trip to Israel and Greece that's going to take place in March of 2026, coming up not too far away. We're going to be going to Israel and Greece, two separate trips. Both of these are spiritual heritage trips that we take each year. The Greece one's brand new. We've been going to Israel, my parents have, for 30 plus years, and exploring the land of the Bible. Well, my brother and I, we're going to be tacking on a tour of Greece, journeying the footsteps of Paul. So that's going to take place in March of 2026. You can go over to our website, wildmongroup.com, to check out all the information, wildmongroup.com, for all the information on Israel and Greece. And we're looking forward to being with you there. We're going to have a great time of fellowship and learning about our rich heritage as believers, as Christians. And so that'll take place in early 2026. All right, turning our attention to some of the news this week that I want to get to this segment while we have the time. The Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, gathered all of the top-level commanders and generals and highest of ranks, essentially, in the military, some several hundred. I think I read some 800 plus of these high military ranks and these leaders at the Pentagon, gathered them all in Quantico at the Marine base there for a meeting and just gave a phenomenal state of the military, basically, address to these military leaders. And the media, they have been been very critical of this meeting and questioning the need of it, etc. And I watched nearly the entire thing, and both the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and the President himself spoke at this event. And it was just phenomenal. It was phenomenal. I mean, this is a military, and this is a War Department, that when you listen to the Secretary, Hegseth, it's a department that had completely lost its way. It was started as the War Department, founded as the War Department, to win America's wars. And then they went with a rebrand to Secretary or to Department of Defense. And then we started trying to be the policemen of the world. And so this rebrand of the military and of the Pentagon is very significant and important. And the reasoning behind it is very good. And so the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, gave a very good 45-minute speech talking about how we need to be the most lethal warfighting country on the planet. And when you do that, when you position yourself with such strength and lethality, oftentimes you don't have to worry about your enemies. You can ensure peace through strength. This goes back to Reagan. Let's listen to the secretary talking about having the highest standards for qualification for those in the military and getting rid of the diversity quotas. Let's listen to clip 2.
Because war does not care if you're a man or a woman. Neither does the enemy. Nor does the weight of your rucksack, the size of an artillery round, or the body weight of a casualty on the battlefield who must be carried. This, and I want to be very clear about this is not about preventing women from serving. We very much value the impact of female troops. Our female officers and NCOs are the absolute best in the world. But when it comes to any job that requires physical power to perform in combat, those physical standards must be high and gender neutral. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is. If that means no women qualify for some combat jobs, so be it. That is not the intent, but it could be the result. So be it. It will also mean that weak men won't qualify because we're not playing games. This is combat. This is life or death.
There you have it. This is combat. This is life or death. And what he's talking about there is these subpar standards that have been developed in the military and allowed to fester because we want to be, quote, equitable and we want to be, quote, equal. Well, we can be equal with the same standard. And if you meet the standard, you meet the standard. If you don't, you don't. But what they had begun doing is altering the standard so they could meet gender quotas, so that they could have X number of females pass these tests and climb in the ranks and get into these positions that they really don't qualify for if all things are equal. And so that's what the secretary is talking about there. And he went on to say, look, no more dudes in dresses, which the Pentagon literally had officials, transgender officials under Biden, walking around with dudes in dresses and having press conferences. And remember, it was Joe Biden that gave us the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. And when you look at the fall of the Pentagon and the degradation of our military and our lethality, as good as we are and as good as we have been, our Pentagon had taken a serious decline, had taken a serious turn for the worse. And if you talk to anyone who was deployed in either Afghanistan or Iraq, the rules of engagement themselves were so upside down. I mean, you had military members, you had soldiers who were trained that you can only go on offense, you can only fire when you're fired upon. So even though you know a threat is imminent, you have to wait to be fired upon before you can engage your enemy. And then we went into this nation building, which I don't know how that idea was able to fester to such a degree that we actually tried it. Like, it's one thing to talk about it at the Pentagon, but they actually tried it and spent billions, hundreds of billions of dollars nation building. You can't do like a pop-up tent democracy in the Middle East. The entire culture is antithetical to a constitutional republic as we see it today. And this is what makes peace so difficult in the Middle East, specifically around Israel. We can't even get Hamas to cut a deal, to cut a peace deal. Much less you think we're going to build a constitutional republic in the middle of this war-ravaged part of the country, part of the world that has been involved in conflicts for hundreds of years, thousands. But nonetheless, we had turned the War Department into this nation-building department, and we were serving as the policemen of the Middle East. And we were trying to train police officers and trying to conduct investigations as if we're on American soil. And we were trying to export the Bill of Rights to our foreign enemies and give them, quote, due process. I mean, all of this was happening. And it might have seemed noble. The concept itself, without scrutiny, seems noble. If we could export America's model to the Middle East and drop it there and it flourish, then who's going to be against that, right? But the practical reality is that that just doesn't work, and it has never worked throughout human history. Otherwise, people would have done it before. If you can just drop a constitutional republic in the middle of the East, of the Middle East, and it does well, then we'll just do that everywhere, right? We'll just go in everywhere. We'll just set up a country, and we'll just set up a democracy. But that's just not how things work. That's not how human nature works. And so we need the War Department, and we need the diversity quotas and the gender quotas and all the climate change departments and all of that gone, and that's what the Defense Secretary is doing. And by the way, he's been under tremendous pressure by the media and the Democrats. He's been under tremendous pressure, even by some Republicans that don't like Hegseth. But he's doing a phenomenal job, and that's how you know who's really doing the best job in the Trump administration are those that are under the most scrutiny. And another example of Secretary Hegseth doing a phenomenal job, this was a couple months ago, but he was under scrutiny for hosting a Christian prayer gathering in the Pentagon, which I thought was phenomenal. And he was really bringing back the days of George Washington, praying over the troops. Listen to this 1-minute response where the Secretary Hegseth defends having prayer in the Pentagon, clip 3.
It's interesting. The question is, I've gotten some criticism for hosting a Christian prayer service at the Pentagon yesterday. We said it very publicly. We said it very proudly. Appealing to heaven, to God, is a long-standing tradition in our military. I'm very proud that we're starting a monthly voluntary service at the Pentagon. George Washington was on bended knee with the troops, praying for God's providence and protection in that moment. Chaplains and ministers and Christians and people of faith across generations have prayed because of the business that we're in. I mean, the business of the 82nd Airborne, and you watch that 911 button for the country, is a dangerous one on behalf of all of us. And we appeal to God. I appeal to Jesus Christ for that protection. We're going to speak that word and be open and willing to talk about that at the Pentagon. If they want to criticize that, they're on the wrong side of a very important issue. So thanks for coming with us today. We'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
There you have it. That's Hegseth defending prayer in the Pentagon. Not just prayer, but Christian prayer. Because, folks, our founding fathers weren't just religious. They were explicitly Protestant Christians, for the most part. And their God that they prayed to, including George Washington's God, was the God of the Bible. And so make no mistakes. Bringing prayer and God into the Pentagon is simply restoring America's founding ideals at our nation's largest and most important department. We'll be back.
At the Core podcast are available at AFR.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to the Core, back to the Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us here on the program. Well, coming up here in just a couple of days is our Fall Share-a-thon. October, Fall Share-a-thon, first week of the month is our Fall Share-a-thon. First week of October, rather, is a Fall Share-a-thon each October, and we're happy to have our listeners join us. And each fall, and of course in the spring as well, we do this twice a year, we simply petition our listening audience to not just pray for the ministry, of course that's vitally important, but also we ask our listeners to financially support the ministry here at American Family Radio. So that's what we'll be doing this upcoming week, and we just are hopeful and optimistic that you'll join efforts with us and financially support the work of American Family Radio. Once we kick off on Monday or Tuesday, you can simply go to afr.net and find out more information, afr.net, and find out more information. And I can tell you this, then you'll hear the testimonies, don't just take my word for it, but lives are being impacted by the work of the ministry here. Lives are being impacted by the network, and not just impacted, but changed. And one of our visions, our primary vision here at the ministry, is to be is to see cultural transformation. We don't just want to impact culture, we want to see transformation. How do you see cultural transformation? Through the changing of your heart and your mind. That's what God does to man. He changes man's heart and man's mind. Read the scripture. The Apostle Paul talks about renewing your mind through the reading and the studying of God's Word, and then other writers in the Scripture talk about how God changes your heart from a heart of stone to a heart of flesh and brings it to life. And so that's what we're ultimately about here. And there's a lot of things that we do. We create films, we produce documentaries, we produce podcasts, we produce articles and magazines, and so there's so much that we do here, but all of it is aimed and driven at seeing a cultural transformation and really fighting and defending America's families here in this country, because we want to see our nation preserved, not for our own interest, but for the interest of the Bible and of the gospel of Jesus Christ, because throughout human history, America stands as the largest exporter of the gospel, the largest sharer, if you will, of the gospel. 85% of missionary work originates from the United States of America. And we've sent millions of missionaries throughout the centuries. And one of our founding fathers wrote that it was either Jefferson or Washington, but he wrote about how the reason that our founders, primary purpose of our founders setting up this constitutional republic was for the propagation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so we ought to continue that noble heritage and that noble path. And the only way to do that is to preserve the nation and to preserve the freedom and the liberty that we have to do the most important thing. And so be on the lookout for that. That'll be Tuesday through Thursday next week. And I do want to jump to our guest. Sherry Few is with us. Sherry is founder and president of U.S. Parents Involved in Education, USPIE to be short. And she's on to talk about the teachers' unions and how much money they are funding to left-wing organizations. Sherry, welcome to the program. Hey, Sherry, are you there? All right, I thought we had Sherry, but we'll see if we can get her on the board. Nonetheless, we were going to have Sherry on to talk about this report that was put out, and I'll still talk about it a little bit here. The report was published by the organization that I just referenced, U.S. Parents Involved in Education, but the New York Post ran a pretty extensive piece on it in late August. And what it's talking about here, and we've talked about it on the program before, but this actually gets into the specifics and deeper than just a general idea. But the teachers' unions are an arm of the Democrat Party. And I've said that before. We've had guests on the program that have alluded to that. But it's one thing to say that, but then to look at the hard numbers and have it back up that assertion just further proves a point and further solidifies that assessment that the teachers' unions are de facto an arm of the Democrat Party. And this is what's so frustrating about the teachers' unions is that in many states, these union dues are mandatory. Not in all, but in many states, these teacher union dues are mandatory. And the fundamental problem here is that they're not serving the best interest of the teachers or the students. That's the fundamental problem here. And I can go, and talk extensively about the fundamental problem that I have with unions in general, which I understand there's some pro-union folks out there, and maybe some of the unions started out with noble purposes, but these things have gotten way off track, and they're disrupting the private sector. They're holding companies hostage, and it's very anti-free market. These unions are. But when you look at the teachers' unions, this is an element of the Democrat Party that is trying to hide behind the guise of being in favor of teachers. The teachers' unions were one of the chief proponents of the lockdowns, the COVID lockdowns, where America's students fell drastically behind on test scores and all other measures of education across America. It was a disaster. The teachers' unions have also been the proponents of this left-wing LGBTQ sexual indoctrination of our minors. That's the teachers' unions, whether we're talking about the American Federation of Teachers or the National Education Association, NEA. When you look at both of those organizations between 2022 and 2024, those two organizations, American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association, NEA, between both of those organizations over a 2-year period between 22 and 24, those organizations shelled out over $43 million to left-wing nonprofit organizations. Reading directly from this New York Post piece, which we'll link to over on the show notes, the largest teacher unions in America, I'm quoting here, gave more than $43 million to liberal advocacy groups over a 2-year period, including several massive payouts to Democratic political action committees during the 2024 election cycle, according to a new report from a conservative education watchdog group. The AFT, American Federation of Teachers, and the NEA, National Education Association, shelled out $43 million between mid-2022 and mid-2024 per a Defending Education report based largely on union disclosures to the Department of Labor. The cash windfall went to lefty groups that back gun control measures, support racial, quote, equity, and gendered transitions for minors, as well as abortion access. Union dues can't be forwarded to political campaigns, though voluntary contributions can be made towards action funds that are supported by members. On its website, the NEA condones political activism so long as it's not in service of any event deemed outrageous and offensive, whatever that means. Though it's unclear, the New York Post says, where the union bosses draw the line, because I would say the Democrat Party in and of itself is outrageous and offensive. And we talked to Sarah Parshall Perry, rather, in recent weeks about this same topic, and she's with Defending Education as well. And so this really brings into question, and really more than brings into question, this really calls serious doubt upon the teachers' union and their very existence. Are they necessary? And at this point, folks, I don't think they are. I'm not sure if they were ever necessary, but I can speak today. I don't think the teachers' unions are necessary at all, because we have elected officials. So if teachers don't like how things are going, they can appeal to their superior, they can appeal to the district, they can appeal to their elected representatives, they can appeal to the school boards, they can appeal to the governor, they can appeal to the Department of Education. There are multiple avenues for remedy here. We don't need teachers' unions. And we definitively don't need forced union dues for teachers. That's a fact. And so we have to disrupt this entire union system that is dominating American classrooms around the country, and ensure that we disrupt this funder of left-wing Democrat Party activism. And this is a further compelling case for school choice to include homeschooling and all forms of private, non-government run education. We have to create competition in the arena of education. That's a fact. When you don't have competition, you get what we have today, and that is utterly failing test scores, which we've talked about, students that are on a reading level that is 5 times below what they should be, and then you've got teachers' union dues being siphoned off by the left-wing radicals and used to fund the Democrat Party. And then you go up to Loudoun County, Virginia, and they're going off the deep end again. I thought we had fixed this, but here we go. We have Loudoun County, Virginia going off the deep end again, letting boys in girls' bathrooms. And the reason that the stronghold on America's education system is so strong is because this is a primary indoctrination avenue for the Democrats. Make no mistake. You take out the indoctrination in American classrooms, the Democrats heavily lose the indoctrination game. Yes, they've still got media. Yes, they've still got entertainment. Yes, they can still get on social media. But one area of indoctrination that is sure to take place every day of every week is in the classrooms. And this is a stronghold of the Marxists, that's a stronghold of the Democrats, and that is the indoctrination of our youth. And if they're not indoctrinating our youth, they're failing to educate them properly. And there's a difference. There's forced indoctrination of ideas and falsehoods, and then there's the neglect, where you just don't talk about America's true history, or you just don't teach them to read and write. And all of this goes hand in hand, and you, I know some people may have a hard time connecting the dots, but if you'll read the writings of our founding fathers, and if you'll read the charters of America's first educational institutions, including William and Mary, by the way, our founding fathers and that entire generation knew in order to have freedom, liberty, and prosperity, and in order to properly propagate the gospel of Jesus Christ, we must have a populace that is literate. And not just literate in reading this generation's latest book or novel, literate in the Word of God. Literate in the original meaning and text of the Bible. And this is why America's first university, and still running today, which we visit when we go to Williamsburg, their primary textbook was the Bible. They wanted students and graduates to know the Word of God because of how critical it is to the preservation of American ideals, which are ultimately biblical ideas, and for the preservation and the advancement of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so education, and we're actually going to have, we've actually had an entire episode on this of AFA at Home, which we'll try to link to as well. But we have to properly This is why history is so important. We have to understand why we have education in America to begin with. Because I understand if you don't know the history of education, you don't know why we have it. You look at education, you look at K through 12, you look at higher ed, and you go, it's a waste of time. You sit in a classroom, you read a bunch of nerdy history books, you learn, math formulas you'll never need in the workforce, and people can easily dismiss education. And I understand some of the cynicism with education, especially modern education. I think we do waste a lot of our young people's time teaching them things that they don't use in life. But nonetheless, the primary purpose of education was and is noble, and that is to have a literate populace that can read and can write and can articulate and can debate and can advance the ideals and the precepts taught in the Scripture, so that we can preserve liberty for this generation and future generations. All in all, education is important. And the teachers' unions aren't serving America's teachers and America's students well. They're not. They're underserving them, and they're funding left-wing Democrat Marxist candidates for public office that are trying to bring our country down. That's what's going on with the teachers' union. So if you're in the teachers' unions, get out and run as fast as you can in the other direction. That's my piece of advice. We'll be back in a few.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the program here on American Family Radio. I'm Walker Wildmon. Glad to have you with us here on the show. Chris Woodward joins us as he does each Friday. Chris, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Well, Chris, as of this recording, the government is still shut down.
Yes.
And half or more of the lawmakers aren't even in Washington, D.C. They might be coming back, some of them over the weekend.
Could be.
There does seem to be, Chris, no urgency. There seems to be no urgency to reopen the government. Isn't that quite interesting?
It is. Now, some people might tell you it's because they're still getting paid. So what do they care if the government is shut down? That has been something people have pointed out this week on programs like on Fox News, on programs on AFR. Members of Congress are paid, whereas other people may not be getting a check or won't be getting a check again until the government reopens, whenever that is.
Yeah. This, Chris, is honestly, I don't want to be a hypocrite. The White House is applying the pressure. White House and Republicans are applying the pressure, and they're highlighting what services are shut down when the government is shut down, which it's fine. They're not misleading people. I will say, and this is not towing the talking points of the White House. I don't think the shutdown is as big of a deal as some people make it. Now, if you take this thing on 30 to 60 days, yes, you start seeing lives impacted. You start seeing, government employees not getting paid, etc. But everybody gets back pay.
Right.
With every single agency, every single government employee that is, quote, furloughed, they get back pay. So everybody gets paid. Nobody's, quote, really missing a paycheck. It just might be delayed. So, but Chris, the petition or the request that the Democrats are going for here, one of them is to rescind part of the One Big Beautiful Bill. That's what they want to do. They want to rescind part of President Trump's signature piece of legislation. And also they want to ensure that Medicaid is available for illegal immigrants.
Right.
And they've been saying, no, the Republicans are lying. But I've read the text of the bill, and they want to turn back on an Obama-era eligibility statute that ensures that illegal immigrants can qualify for Medicare, or Medicaid, rather. Medicare. And so, Medicaid. There's two different programs.
Right.
Why the marketing team decided to name them basically the same thing.
Government, they always screw it up.
Right. But Democrats are in a spot here, Chris.
They really are, and they're the reason we have things like Medicare and Medicaid. It's not fair for a working American who pays way too much in taxes to have to pay for things not only in this government, but for people who broke the law and are continuing to break the law to be here. That sounds cruel, that sounds heartless, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
Americans, by and large, are underpaid and overtaxed. Why in the world would you do something to benefit somebody else who shouldn't be even here in the first place and is taking up room in a line at a hospital where people go to get health care?
Yes. Yeah, it's baffling. And Chris, it's still rather shocking to me, just from a practical and political standpoint, that this is where the Democrats want to fight. It's one thing to fight to expand welfare for their voting base, or to make sure that the state and local tax deduction is restored because their donors in New York and California want their taxes to be lower. But with this, Chris, technically speaking, none of these people should be Democrat voters anyway,
right?
Unless they're in California and they're giving them driver's license,
right? Yeah.
But it's just so bizarre that the Democrats, that this is their voting bloc now that they're petitioning for.
Right. This is one of the reasons why I think Donald Trump and J.D. Vance got as many votes as they did in urban areas in the 2024 election. And I bring that up because in places like Chicago, you had African-American voters that were Democrats that were upset with city services because they were doing things that taxpayers are paying for and expecting a return on their investment, right? And the city was turning around and giving those things to people that should not be here. It's the same reason why you had people in Chicago at city council meetings giving the mayor the business in 2024. It's the same reason why Donald Trump got a huge turnout at a rally in a place not far from where AOC is representing, or it may have even been in the same district. He won as many votes as he did in big urban areas because of issues like this. And there was a time where Democrats would have said, hey, if you're not here, I can't help you. But for some reason, in the 2024, 2025 year in which we live, they're literally turning their back on people that are Americans, are funding the government they're representing, and they're ignoring the situations of their own constituents to benefit people that might vote for them.
Yeah. Chris, there's a race, and you didn't come on to talk about this, but there's a governor's race in New Jersey this year, and a couple other states as well. But Republicans are gaining some headway there. And New Jersey's not really a deep blue state.
No,
when you look at the numbers, they are a blue state, but not a deep blue state like California. But wouldn't that be something if a Republican won the New Jersey governorship?
Yeah, it would. It's the first one in a long time. I know Chris Christie, some people would say he's not really a Republican, but he was Republican compared to other governors they've had in the past. What I would not be shocked if you were to see that fall into Republican hands and that person come out and say, hey, if you don't want to live under Mamdani's leadership there in New York City, come across and live in New Jersey where it's cheaper, it's safer, it's more secure. Come to New Jersey.
So the Republicans, just to give some numbers, and then we'll jump on to some of these other topics.
Okay.
The GOP has netted roughly 220,000 Republican registrations in New Jersey since 2021. And the last election was lost by just 84,000 votes. The last governorship election was lost, the Republican lost by 84,000 votes. That's a big deal. And so Democrats are in a bad spot. And I said this after the 2024 election. Democrats are in a bad spot, and they'll stay in a bad spot because they have the inability, they are unable to self-correct. They are a radical party, they are a godless party, and they have nobody in the party, they kick them all out, that will speak any semblance of sanity and truth into the Democrat culture.
Yeah. To your point here about how they fail to self-correct, this week, Rahm Emanuel, who was the mayor of Chicago and was a representative for Illinois, he worked for the Obama administration back in the day, He wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal in which he's trying to convince Democrats, like, hey, we need to have an education reset and start having a serious conversation about educational reforms that Republicans are out there pushing. And I'm not making this up. The quote from one of many quotes from Rahm Emanuel is this: Democrats must realize that if money alone could solve the problem, every American student would be a National Merit Scholar. He then goes on to say, we need to be focusing more on teaching students actual pronouns rather than what pronouns we think they should have and which bathroom to use. In 2025, a Democrat is saying this. Now, I talked to Corey DeAngelis for a reaction to this, and he said, finally, a Democrat has come around on this issue. But he went on to point out, and I think he's correct, that there's a lot of Democrat constituents out there that want things like school choice. But the problem is the teachers union, which control the Democratic Party, are telling the party leaders, hey, don't do this. It's bad. We're not going to donate to you, or I'm going to endorse your primary challenger, all these things. And because of that, you have Democrats making boneheaded decisions in the education realm and in all the other parts of government.
Yeah. When you look at the Democrat policies and the policies of the teachers unions, hardly any of them are actually serving the students. They're, if anything, serving the teachers or serving the unions or the bureaucracy, but definitely not the students, which should be the primary focus. Chris, what about this story on the Green New Deal funding that President Trump and the Republicans just keep pulling billions away from these Green New Deal slush funds?
Yes, and these are taxpayer dollars. In a story you can find on our website, afn.net, the Trump administration is canceling nearly $8 billion in grants that supported hundreds of so-called clean energy projects in 16 states, all of which voted for Democrat Kamala Harris in last year's presidential election. When you read down into the article, you'll see that 223 projects were terminated after a review determined that they did not adequately advance the nation's energy needs or were not economically viable. Some people say, might say, well, Green New Scam, that's kind of harsh. If you're trying to sell something on people and you're requiring them to pay taxes for it, they should get their money back. There should be a return on investment. We shouldn't be funding solar panels and wind turbines and all the other things out there if it's not doing what they told us it would.
Yeah.
If you were spending money on something and it didn't work out well, or it wasn't going to work out well, you have all the right to say, I'm not funding this anymore.
Yes.
So the administration is helping everybody listening to the sound of my voice by stopping this, because Democrats and Republicans and Libertarians and a whole lot of other people are funding things that are not working. So why not cut it?
Yeah, if you allow the free market, Chris, to drive the energy sector, wind and solar would be nothing what it is today. But I'm not saying it wouldn't exist. It might exist in some fringe markets, or as some ultra expensive option for people who just have money to spend, or maybe in remote areas where power generation is expensive and difficult. But you would have nowhere near the level of use of wind and solar today had it not been subsidized by the federal government.
Right.
And I'll even say this, Elon Musk would not have sold nearly as many Teslas had it not been for those tax credits. I mean, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
And so when you allow the free market to do what it does, and that tells you what consumers want and what they don't want, this whole so-called renewable, even though technically there's no energy that is truly renewable, some is longer lasting than others, but it wouldn't be nearly what it is today. Right. But when the government pumps over $1 trillion into something, of course, for a little while, it's going to look popular and great.
Yeah. Some of these things that they cut funding for were like charging stations in bad neighborhoods that lack things like grocery stores. A bad neighborhood doesn't need a place to charge an EV. They need a place to buy some food because they have to live and work in that area. The government can and should be doing better things with money. If we're required to pay for it, the expectation should be that you're going to do something that's actually going to benefit people in that area. And, some people I've talked to over the years have said things like, well, Iowa gets like a lot of its energy now from wind energy. And that's great. It's true. Iowa does get a lot of its energy now from wind energy. But Iowa has a population of about 3.2 million people. Okay, that doesn't mean what Iowa's doing can work for the entire country.
Right.
And we're not going to use a lot of the space to put wind turbines and stuff like that. I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but you don't see a lot of green energy projects like solar panels and wind turbines where Nancy Pelosi lives.
No, because they need way more power than those can produce.
Right. And it's also an eyesore.
Yeah,
for the country.
Duly noted. Very much an eyesore. Yeah, and when you look at even the ones in like Iowa, when you look at the money that it costs to build them, I mean, the return on investment is like decades out. And the same thing with solar. I mean, you talk to engineers today that understand electricity, understand energy, they laugh at solar. They're like, do you know how many panels you will need
right.
to get the power that you want? It's just crazy. And you look at these aerial shots of China and how they're just filling the mountainsides with solar panels. It's just a stain on our earth, and it disrupts God's created order, and it's very, very inefficient. And then not to mention a lot of the raw materials and the panels themselves are sourced out of China.
Yeah.
So we're making ourselves more and more reliant on the Chinese supply chain. Chris, what's the last story that you guys have covered? One last story you guys have covered this week.
Well, I do want to bring people's attention to something that involves abortion, because we cover a lot of pro-life news, being a Christian ministry and a news service inside AFA here. And I want to bring this to people's attention because this week, even as the government was about to shut down, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, quietly approved a new generic version of the abortion drug mifepristone. The drug is produced by something called Avita Solutions, LLC, a company that describes its mission as being to normalize abortion and make it accessible to all. I talked to Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, or SBA Pro-Life America, about this. They're concerned. They want people to reach out to various officials and tell them not to do these kinds of things. The concern being that the abortion drug is very harmful to women, certainly babies as well, but women. And there's a lot of people out there that will tell you that the abortion drug is safe, it's harmless, it's as harmless as Tylenol, they'll tell you. But SBA has said that no, actually, when you take this, it can cause massive problems. And
Yes.
to their point, there was a big study out this year that found nearly like 11% of women that take abortion drugs have serious adverse health reactions because of it.
Absolutely, yeah. The abortion drug mifepristone is dangerous, and there's studies that bear that out, and real life testimonies as well. And it's obviously dangerous solely on the fact that it takes the life of the child. That in and of itself is the definition of dangerous, and then furthermore, it can harm the mother as well. So 2 injuries and even deaths can take place from the use of mifepristone. Terrible decision by the FDA. They must rescind that quickly, very quickly. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, folks. See you next time.